Call this council meeting to order. This time, if you're able, please rise for our national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all us command, car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix, ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on God for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on God for thee.
This time, if I can call on Councillor Beauregard for our land acknowledgement.
The Niagara region is situated on treaty land. The land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Adirondack, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island who live and work in Niagara today. The City of Port Colborne stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live.
Thank you, Councillor. There are no proclamations. We need to adopt the agenda. If I can have Councillors Bodner and Hoyle move the agenda as amended. Any questions to the agenda or change of orders? All in favor? That's carried. Disclosures of interest. We have one disclosure of interest. Councillor Beauregard declared a conflict of interest on confidential item 21.3, Corporate Services Department Report 2023-123, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Any other disclosures? Thank you. Approval of minutes. If I could have Councillors Elliott and Bruno move the minutes of the regular meeting of council from June the 13th, 2023. Questions to those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. So under reports that are being pulled this evening, we have items 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.6, and correspondence item 9.4. There was an additional 2 items added, 8.7 and 8.8. Are there any further items to be pulled? If I could have Councillors Bagu and Beauregard move the remainder of the items. All in favor? That's carried. We don't have any presentations or delegations. Mayor's report. Well, just to remind everybody, Councillors Aquilina and Danch and Regional Councillor Davies will not be attending this evening, just so everybody knows that. On behalf of City Council and staff, congratulations to the graduating classes of 2023 at Lakeshore Catholic High School and Port Colborne High School. Each high school is celebrating convocation ceremonies this evening, where hundreds of proud parents will be cheering their sons and daughters for their achievements. We salute the principals and staff for their commitment to students after 3 challenging years. We send best wishes to all the students for the next chapters of their lives. Make the most of every year, students. And we thank also the teachers and students from Lakeshore, St. Pat's, and DeWitt Carter schools for coming to visit us at City Hall earlier this month to learn about all the things we do for our city. And it was good to meet so many bright, eager children and caring teachers. Just a quick commendation for Ian Roberts, our Superintendent of Roads and Parks, who recently received additional provincial certification from the Association of Ontario Roads Supervisors. Council supports the continued education and training of our staff for their personal growth, as well as to add to the experience and expertise of our team. We're proud of our team. Those letters after Ian's name are as important to us as they are to him. Today also happens to be Ian's 5th anniversary with the City of Port Colborne. 2 excellent achievements to celebrate. Congratulations, Ian. The library's Let's Talk About series is back with an important session to wrap up Seniors Month. The session is Thursday, June the 29th, from 2 to 4 p.m. in the L.R. Wilson Archives, which is next door to the library. There will be speakers from the Niagara Regional Police, Friends Over 55, Bridges, and Port Cares, as well as city staff from Bylaw, Fire Department, and the Seniors Advisory Committee. I will also be attending to answer seniors' questions and concerns, so come out and let's talk Thursday afternoon. We'll learn about health and safety and security in our community. We're all well aware of that speeding is a huge issue within all communities, not just Port Colborne, but across Niagara and the province. There are more car crashes and accidents on roads and highways than ever before. We all have to slow down, so please drive the speed limit. Give yourself time to get where you're going. We do have signs you can put on your lawn to remind drivers to slow down in the safety zone where you live. Come to City Hall and get one from our customer service team on the first floor. And also on Fridays we'll be at the Market Square handing those out. We had a perfect day to welcome sponsors and special guests to our Canal Days launch party last Wednesday in the pavilion at Lakeshore Marina. It was a fantastic event. Kudos to Jasmine Pizzo-Graham and her communications team, and Amy Duffy and her Canal Days crew for an excellent presentation and a great lineup throughout Canal Days. Things are really coming together. We're getting great action on social media and lots of positive response. The festival is about a month away, guys. Rather than read this list of bands and musicians, let's cue up the video and share all the sights and sounds of what's to come. Madam Clerk. Thanks, Charlotte. That was great. And we're all looking forward to the 45th Annual Canal Days Festival on the Civic Holiday Long Weekend, and we can't wait to see everyone there again. Before we get to our signature festival in 5 weeks, it's our country's 156th birthday. This coming Saturday, yes, Canada Day, July 1st, is already here. The Niagara Antique Power Heritage Display Annual Canada Day weekend is back, full steam. I'll be out at the Learn Farm on Wilhelm Road at noon for opening ceremonies. The volunteers have coordinated a terrific weekend of historic displays and activities for the whole family. I'll also be celebrating with the Port Colborne Optimists in H.H. Noel Lakeview Park. Activities and events, food and non-stop music get underway at 10 a.m. and run right through to 6 p.m. I'll see you there for opening ceremonies at 1, and there are so many things to see and do, including the Niagara Regional Police Band at 2:30. When the Optimists wind up Canada Day in the park, we'll move over to West Street for the continuation of Port Colborne's Community Concert Series. Canada Day on the Canal runs from 6 to 10 p.m. The concert stage will be near the Harbour Master House on West Street at Charlotte. X Prime takes the stage at 6:30, followed by Grace 2, the Tragically Hip Tribute Band, at 8:30. Stick around for Canada Day fireworks over the canal at 10 p.m. We are always complimented by our fireworks display over the canal, designed by Red Boss. Let's all look forward to an amazing weekend ahead with lots of local things to do to make us appreciate our home, our city, and our country. And let's support all the organizations and volunteers. Let's salute our neighbors, and let's all be thankful and proud to be Canadian. And as well, please stay safe on our long weekend. That's it for my mayor's report. Are there any questions? Thank you, Council. As I said, Councillor Davies won't be here this evening. Any regional issues? Thank you. Staff remarks? Nothing? 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 Clerk's Department? Mr. Long? Mr. Higginbotham?
Good evening, Council. Through your worship to Council, I wanted to just remind the public that's watching this evening, and Council as well, that we have been continuing to engage the community with respect to the waterfront redevelopment project. We had a really well-attended open house on June 14th. We have the concepts for the waterfront redevelopment project on display on the first floor of City Hall. Those concepts are available online in the form of a questionnaire. We've received up until this point over 100 submissions to that questionnaire, and that questionnaire will remain open as well until the end of the month, but we are looking to extend it a little bit more into July as well, just so we can capture as much feedback as possible. And we're also planning to do more public engagement in the form of attending this Friday's farmers market. We're going to be out there with the concepts on display, and we're also looking at doing a little bit of a pop-up as well at the Valley Health and Wellness Center with the concepts, just so we can make sure that as many people as possible have the opportunity to view those concepts and provide their feedback.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Higginbotham. Questions? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you. Oh, it's a great presentation and some great options. I thought it was well explained, well laid out, well positioned, the two readings. There was a group that Councillor Elliott and I are involved with that wanted to make a comment, but I think they were going to next meet on July 19th or 20th, and I didn't know if you could hold a trailing submission till that date.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Bruno, we can. We can extend every accommodation to allow that feedback to come in.
Great, thank you.
Good. Thanks. Madam Clerk?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to give a brief update. We are conducting committee recruitment right now. The deadline to apply is this Friday, June 30th. We are currently recruiting for the Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee, the Environmental Advisory Committee, the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee, and the Grant Allocation Advisory Committee. So again, the deadline to submit applications is this Friday, June 30th.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Anything further from staff? Okay. On to Councillor's remarks. I'm going to start with my right. Councillor Borgard. Thank you. Councillor Baggio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have one earlier one about the city used to run our kids camps, summer camps, and I questioned with staff what happened to it, and basically I found out that the city switched it over to the YMCA to run, and so we don't duplicate programs. So I hear they're doing a good job and they're filling up fast. So, and the other one, Mr. Mayor, you probably should have had in your report the Port Colborne Concert Band with Brenda Fairchild Green returns to H.H. Stoll Park on July 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th at 7:20. It's Thursday evenings, and bring your lawn chair, and this is some great old bands. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. I played for Mr. Fairchild. And you being the Ward 1 Counselor, like when I was in your seat, the Ward 1 Counselors always brought that up. So I knew you were going to bring it up. No, that's fantastic. Good music from that band. Great evening. Counselor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Two of mine, one from a constituent, through you to Mr. Shapowski. Steve, I believe there was a car accident right across from our new Port Colborne sign and from the cycle shop. That lamp post was taken out a couple of months ago. Still got a cone on it. Is that ours or the region's? I think it's ours, isn't it?
Mr. Shapowski.
Yep. Through your worship, to Councilor Bruno, we do, so the decorative poles on Main Street are part of the city's inventory, so we do order those on a basis. Sometimes it takes a little while for them to be ordered and actually come into stock before we can reinstall them, so there is somewhat of a delay typically.
Okay, great. Good. So you're on it. That's good. The other one was the new Port Colborne sign. This was a constituent one. When you come off the Jackknife Bridge, I know you're going to be moving some trees in Lakeview Park. And so when you come off the Jackknife Bridge coming west, as soon as you start looking at the sign, it's blocked by a tree there. I think it was a dedication tree. It's got the post with somebody's name on it. If you're moving them, I'm just wondering if that can get moved over, because it's right in the sight triangle to look at the sign, the new sign.
Shapowski.
Through your worship, we can definitely take that into consideration and have a look and see where we can move the tree.
Okay, great, thanks. And just the last one, going up, you guys do a great job of the shouldering on Elm Street, which is pretty extensive from Meadow Heights all the way back up to like Oscom's, where it's all ours with that great big wide boulevard. Well, we cut it as good as I think can be expected. It's a golf course, but nobody cuts around all those poles, all those hydro poles, all those fire hydrants. So if you go from Oscom all the way down, you basically have about 3 neighbors who that's in their backyard have cut it. The other ones, so I don't know if the guy cutting it's got a weed whacker with them at the same time, if they could trim that up.
Mr. Shapowski.
Yep, through your worship. So we do have our contractor cut that area.
Okay.
The 2 weeks before Canal Days, they are retained to actually do the cut, but they also do weed whacking in between just to beautify the area on most of the roads that are coming into town. So that will be completed before August 1st.
Great, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Elliott. Thank you. Counselor Hoyle.
Through the mayor to Steve. Steve, I thank staff for cleaning up Seaway Park. Some trimming, it was much needed. And secondly, do we have an update on when those accessible ramps will be in at the beach for the washrooms?
Mr. Bowles.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah. Through the mayor to the councillor, I think they're a week and a half away. They are. We had a number of the non-accessible ramps just delivered, and the accessible ramps, I understand, are coming really soon.
Counselor?
That's all.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One item through you to Steve. There was signage that I believe hasn't been erected at Wildwood Beach at the road end yet. Are we still on track to get that up? I think there was a few signs missing there.
Through your worship. So we have looked at the Wildwood Road end, and there was a resident out there that did raise concerns about a couple signs missing. So we are going to be contacting them in the near future to be able to do a site visit just to see exactly which signs are missing there, and we'll move forward from there. I know there was concerns about road end signage, and staff will be bringing a report back to council about our road ends and what the proposal is for those road ends based on public consultation and the previous report done by the Sierra Group. So we will be bringing that back, and those signs, the larger signs that address concerns at the road ends, would be installed at that time, or proposed to council at that time at least.
Okay.
Counselor?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have some general concerns regarding the operation of the Port Colborne and District Conservation Club and its impact on the community. I will still be bringing forward a motion regarding potential amendments to the city's discharge of firearms and notice bylaw at the July 18th, 2023 council meeting. However, I've become aware that there is also a provincial process taking place regarding shooting range approval. Given the time-sensitive nature of the provincial process, I am requesting that council waive the rules of the city's procedural bylaw in order for me to dispense with notice and bring forward a motion later tonight with respect to the city sending a letter to the Chief Firearms Officer of Ontario regarding shooting range approval for the Port Colborne and District Conservation Club.
Thank you, Councillor. So at this time, if I could have Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Hoyle move that we waive our procedural bylaw so that under motions, Councillor Bodnar can bring his motion forward. Questions to that? All in favor? That's carried. Anything further at this time?
That's it.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, on to our items. So the first item is item 8.1. Physician recruitment activities update 2023-92. We have from the Niagara region, our partner in doctor recruitment is Jill Croteau. Jill's going to give us a presentation this evening, and it's the same one we had at our Health Services Advisory Committee the other evening. So, Council, this is phenomenal information for us. Jill, welcome, and go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Thank you for having me tonight. I just wanted to give a bit of an update in terms of the recruitment, physician recruitment for the region and also for the City of Port Colborne. So following the same format, just kind of a brief introduction of the physician recruitment program, the landscape of primary care in the region, and specifically in Port Colborne, and then some opportunity and just some updates in terms of some localized interest and some of the strategies that we're taking to meet the gaps in 2023 and 2024. So I start with this slide, just I don't know how many new staff we do have on board here, but just in terms of the recruitment strategy for the physician recruitment program, some of the components, marketing, I attend multiple different career fairs throughout the year, partner with the communities to do site tours and interviews, whether that be in person or through Zoom. I do and have I am doing quite a bit more support with immigration and licensing through Service Canada and the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. Work very closely and collaboratively with each municipality through the onboarding process, just to make sure that physicians are connected to the appropriate resources locally. And then also, I also help to advertise patients, just to ensure the success of physicians if they're not already taking over an existing practice, if they're starting something new. So I would connect them to patients that way. And then workforce planning. So identifying what the gaps are in the community and ensuring that we have kind of accurate numbers and targets to work towards. So the demographics. So this has changed a bit within the last quarter. We've seen more physicians convert to family health organizations, which is and seems to be the preferred model of care with primary care in Niagara. Specifically in Port Colborne, 100% of the doctors are part of a family health organization. So we have two groups, each of those being an FHO. The 27% with being part of a family health team, those groups are also associated with an FHO or an FHN. So they just, an FHT just means that they have additional resources from the ministry to support their allied health component. Family health groups is a fee-for-service model. So that would be a family health group. We don't have any of those here in Port Colborne, but there are other areas, specifically St. Catharines, who has one of the larger FHG groups. 4% of our physicians across Niagara are part of a community health center. 5% in a community health center, 4% in a comprehensive care model, which is a solo model of care, and then 4% in a non-enrolling fee-for-service model, which is, again, they're not enrolling into a ministry model, but they're still giving that continuity of care as a family practitioner. So some of our Niagara stats, we are currently sitting at 255 family physicians in Niagara. 232 of those are in a patient enrollment model through the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. So 90% of our family doctors are part of that enrollment model. I have been obtaining ministry data on enrollment in Niagara, and specifically outlining each municipality. So we have learned that the physicians that are enrolling patients in Niagara only have the capacity to enroll 67% of our population. With the family doctors that are approaching retirement age, we also see from this data that 16% of the 255 physicians, those that are in an enrollment model, they roster over 52,000 patients. So really important that we kind of develop a strategy moving forward into the 5 to 7 years in the future, so that we can address those patients that are potentially going to be unattached due to retirement. We also know that the average practice size in Ontario is 1,380 patients. So we can estimate that based on our population of 477,000 people, we should have about 346 family doctors based on our population. So with the 255 family doctors that we have, it shows that we're short about 91 family doctors here in Niagara. So the next few slides, I break it down into municipality. So we can see that Port Colborne, if I can read that, with the population size of 20,000 people, it's right in the middle. The physicians that are within the city of Port Colborne, they rostered just over 9,000 patients. So again, it's that capacity to enroll the 100% of the population here in Port Colborne, and we can see that it's less than half. And if we benchmark the number of physicians in the community based on what our suggested ministry number would be, we have 10 doctors in Port Colborne. The ministry would suggest that we have 14 for this population size, so we're short about 4. So this slide combines the last couple of slides. So we know that with the population, our physicians enroll about 322,000 population, which leaves a gap of about 155,000 people. We also know that we have 255 doctors with a gap of 91. Oh, sorry, I just wanted to add to this slide as well. We also know that there's 12,000 patients that are enrolled or that are clients of the community health centers throughout Niagara. So if we add that number in along with the FHO practices tend to see about 10% outside of their regular family practice. So if we add in that number as well, it's about 20,000. So we're at about 125,000 of our population that are really unaccounted for. So they are either seeking their care at walk-in clinics, urgent care centers, or outside of the region. So some of the supply challenges that we've been facing over the past number of years, we know that our family medicine residency programs graduate 400 doctors each year. So if you look at the hfojobs.ca job board, which is a free site through Ontario Health, we see that there's 1,800 plus job postings for family medicine in our province. So significantly disproportionate, the number of physicians that were graduating each year versus the number of jobs that we have posted. The province is taking measures to rectify that. They have increased spots in our medical schools and our residency programs, and they have also added medical schools to our programs throughout the province. But again, I think it's going to take a bit of time before we actually train these doctors and we have them ready to practice in our clinics. We also know that we lose about 6 to 7% of our doctors through attrition, so due to retirement. That's been consistent over a number of years, a little bit higher throughout the pandemic, but we know that that's the number that we need to consistently aim to, once we get past this 91 gap, we need to start looking at succession planning for those that are looking. We're never going to have doctors that aren't retiring. It's inevitable. They're all going to age, so we need to have a succession plan for that as well. We also know that in Niagara, with our last census data, our population has grown over 30,000 people since 2019. We also know that 19 physicians left practice and 19 were added to our our complement of doctors. We also know that Niagara has very few doctors that are accepting patients right now for a population of 477,000 people. So we also know that over the pandemic, in the last few years, there is a significant amount of those doctors that closed their practices without a successor. So again, it takes time for them to realign with a new primary care provider. So it's not that the doctors aren't necessarily accepting patients. It's just it's going to take time for them to be able to get through their wait list and to see them timely. So just a snapshot of the Port Colborne primary care landscape. So 100%, again, 100% of the primary care models in the city are either a FO or a CHC. The city does not have any walk-in clinics. Within the past 5 years, we've had 5 doctors come into the city and then 5 doctors leave. So we're really at a net zero. So again, Port Colborne with their 20,000 population, we do have a recommendation that they have 14 doctors to provide services to this community. So we're still short about 4. Again, some of the caveats to this data. So there is a nurse practitioner at Bridges who does provide coverage to residents of Port Colborne and Wainfleet. And then again, residents can be seeking care outside of the city if they could have a doctor in, say, St. Catharines or other areas within the region. So, which kind of brings attention to a regional strategy. So it is important that we look at this. Sometimes our borders are gray when it comes to where we as residents are seeking care. So if we look at this from a regional perspective, though, it's about 30% of the residents of Niagara who are either seeking care outside of the region or who don't have care at all. I just wanted to reiterate, too, I have been doing a number of Zoom interviews with physicians outside of Ontario and outside of Canada. Port Colborne is definitely on the radar, so I just wanted to mention that. And some of the feedback that I've had, from these candidates, Port Colborne is an absolutely desired community to work and live. They've got great leadership with their physician communities. So it's definitely they're attractive patient enrollment models, and they're attractive groups to want to live in or want to work in. Again, and the primary interest continues to be a FO model. So this is candidates moving from another province or country. They're also looking for financial support. So thank you to the City of Port Colborne for providing that recruitment policy and incentive package. It's extremely helpful in a very competitive landscape, not only regionally, not only provincially, not only nationally, but also internationally, because we are competing internationally now for our doctors. So just a snapshot of where we see our doctors coming from. In the past 5 years, we can see that we do have a medical school here in Niagara. We work very closely with them. So 29% of those family physicians that are starting in the region, they come from the McMaster program. 28% from Ontario, 14% from outside of Ontario, 14% from the US, 13% from the UK, and then 1% from Australia. So looking into 2023, even into 2024, we continue to have expanding outreach into the US and the UK. I have a number of career fairs that I'm attending over the summer and the fall, 2 in the US and 1 in Scotland. So kind of reaching out to the physicians across the United Kingdom. And again, thankful for Bram's support. Just, continue to encourage the municipalities to work with the regional program to develop their capacity. It's going to, as the increase in interest of physicians come into the region, it's important that we're able to show them clinic space. So working with economic development is and that partnership is wonderful. So thank you, Bram, for that. And again, developing a 5 to 10 year strategy just to address some of the physician workforce planning. And again, our region is looking to grow significantly over the next 15 years. So that growth, we're going to need doctors for that growth as well. So with that trajectory, I think I calculated that we would need about 30 new doctors each year to come into Niagara to meet our current gap and to also address our growth. Yeah.
Great. Jill, thank you. Graham, anything to add?
Sorry.
No, I would like to thank Jill actually for her support. We are actually working on a new doctor that we hope to announce in the next little while. We're working on a contract for her, for them, and we will be looking to have an announcement soon. They will be taking over a current retiring doctor over the next number of years. So that is good news because that means we won't have more people being put into the system looking for doctors. The bad news is that, the great news is we're growing as a community. The bad news is we have to go out and find more doctors to support that growing community. We know the growth projections that we see for our city, and it's going to need additional doctors to support that. We want to be a city that is a place to work, live, and play, and part of that is having a healthy family physicians for the community.
Great, thank you. I'll go to questions. I do have 2 councillors that put their names in already. Councillor Bagu, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jill and Bram. When you say she, was that just, you're talking about Jill, I hope? Okay.
We'll have an announcement.
Well, yeah.
You blew it. The city does contribute to the Niagara physician recruitment, if I'm not mistaken. That's sure a budget, I think. But what my concern is, we also have the incentive package, where I think every municipality has an incentive package. So it's like an auction I'm looking at. Like it's like the federal government with Volkswagen, the other company, Ontario government. Like we want you here, so it goes to an open auction. And so when you're recruiting these doctors, I'm sure you have to say what each municipality has as an incentive package, and they'll make their own decision on that. So I just don't like it personally, but I'll leave it at that. The one question I do have for you: what's needed to get a walk-in clinic in Colborne? Does it go through regional government, through you, through?
So I want to maybe mention the difference between a family practice and a walk-in clinic. So a walk-in clinic model is really designed for people who maybe don't have access to care. Finding a doctor to work in a walk-in clinic, it's probably more difficult to find. We're all recorded here. It's a little more challenging to find a physician to work in a walk-in clinic because there's not a guaranteed income, versus if you were recruiting into family practice into a faux model, there's a guaranteed income. So it's, and a faux model is, it's a comprehensive model of care, and it also provides that continuity of care, whereas a walk-in clinic is, it's more of a quick fix. So to your question, through the chair, if someone wanted to come in and set up a walk-in clinic, it would be just, again, bricks and mortar. If there was a management company that wanted to put that together and assist with recruiting doctors into a walk-in clinic, they would not need a ministry approval for that. They could come at any time if they had the space available and start a walk-in clinic. It's a risky model to start new, and it often takes that one person to kind of take a leap of faith that they're going to be busy, because they don't always know if they're going to be busy, and it's a fee-for-service model, so it's risky.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Just one point of clarification. Our budget does not include money that goes for Jill. Jill is under the employment of the region, so it's under your regional taxes. What is in our budget, though, is physician recruitment or any type of other practitioner that we see fit to bring in, where we do, there is a financial incentive, and as I think you mentioned earlier, which is all across Ontario. Everybody saw in the paper, probably, if you read the paper today or yesterday, Welland just asked for their councillors to put in another $1 million into their recruitment budget. So, I mean, it is getting heftier out there to attract doctors, but, you know, when you're underserviced, you know, that might be something that this council will want to discuss moving forward. But, you know, I think our working relationship with Jill at the region and the other staff bodes well for us. So, Graham, you had something to add?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, our compensation, our recruitment budget is very competitive right now with other cities within the municipality, within Niagara region. Welland did make an announcement that does trump ours a little bit. Across the province, we are losing a little bit of ground over the last couple of years to other communities that are underserviced as well, and are taking another step in order to recruit doctors. As Jill mentioned, it is the one question, when you bring doctors from overseas, they are looking for a financial incentive to help get them settled. I mean, they're taking a leap of faith, leaving their home country where they're established to come here, and they are looking for incentives to support them as they take that leap of faith to join our community. So it is something I do believe we are doing a study across the province right now to see what it looks like, and in the future it may come back to council that there may be a need for an increase or may not be, but it is something that we are studying and keeping an eye on.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. You know, Councillor Bowder and I have been on that committee for a number of years when we had our own. And one of the questions, Bram, I wanted to ask you, I don't recall with COVID happening and us not meeting and the changeover to have Jill be our representative 100%. We used to have other incentives for nurse practitioner, pain clinic, all these kind of things. And I wondered if we folded that all into just the recruitment of GPs.
Through you, Mayor, to council. No, we have not. We still do. We have the name has just escaped me. We support a couple of different health initiatives here in the community. We have also made some outside the box decisions to help some physicians that were needed some support in other areas. So it's not just all wrapped into our physician recruitment. We actually have a little bit of an extra budget. And then I believe recently, the name is escaping me, I'm so sorry. They came to council and asked for...
Was it Memory Clinic?
Memory Clinic came and asked for some funding, and council agreed to it. So actually, I believe we just sent them their money the other day. So we do have things outside of just physician recruitment and attraction and incentives. We do look to support other medical benefits to our community.
The Pathstone Mental Health for Youth is part of that we support too. So there are several that we do.
If I could, I'm just wondering, maybe this is more a question for Bram and perhaps Mr. Bowles, I'm putting him on the spot, or the CAO who's taken a leadership role in physician recruitment, in light of the increased shortage and demand, and in light of some of our neighboring municipalities changing the incentive program. Is that something that a combination of you three are going to bring to council come budget time, whether the amount we have in the budget is adequate, or will there be a report on a review of how we spend that money, and do we need to spend more money or less money or chart a different path? So I'm looking to see what's in store on the horizon.
CAO?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bruno, a few, I guess it's been years now ago, we brought a recruitment guidelines up for approval by council, and those guidelines kind of shape the work that we do. We also have delegated authority for staff to enter into an incentive agreement with family practitioners without bringing it to council up to a certain dollar limit. And if a doctor came in here and asked for more than that limit, it would trigger a council report. So we, Jill, Bram, and myself would bring you our advice, our recommendation, whether to go above that amount or not. And if a different kind of practitioner than a family physician came forward, a specialist of some kind, a pediatric, any kind of really segment of practice, that also wouldn't qualify for the delegated authority. So that would have to come to council for approval. We try to make sure that it's an area of need. So I hopefully I'm not using the wrong words here, Jill, but like an optometrist or something that there already is not a shortage of, we probably wouldn't recommend council use that incentive. But nurse practitioner or some kind of family physician adjacent type of skill set where it would help with our unrostered patients, we could bring that to council under our existing budget. So I don't think it's a case of adding money in the annual budget to the physician recruitment incentive funds. It's a case of if we ever had another use of those funds than a GP, family practitioner, we would bring you a report and say consider using these monies for a different type of provider. I'm not sure if Jill wants to add to that or not.
Anything to add, guys?
The only thing I was going to add is that we are keeping an active eye on through you, Mayor, to Council, we are keeping an active eye on what other communities are doing, sort of what the landscape looks like, so that if we ever were at a disadvantage, that we would then bring a report forward to say, perhaps the delegated authority could be raised in order to do this, and that would be up for council to decide. But we are keeping an active eye on what's happening across the province to make sure that we're not out of step to our detriment.
Councillor?
Thinking, I'm sure Jill may share this frustration. I know I've shared it all through the years looking at this. If you look at the numbers that are in the estimates as to how many physicians we should have, if you look at the numbers of our population, if you look at the shortfall, and if you look at the 1,380, is it, per doctor, the math still doesn't add up. And so I wonder if that's just a fault in the tracking of systems. So for example, we show that we've got 9,335 people with a rostered doctor, right? If you add 4 physicians at 1,300, you come to 13,855, and our population's 20,000. So 6,000 people, right, is a pretty big margin of error. So where does that fall in? Is it that if I have a family doctor who's in Pelham, do I get counted in Pelham? Do I get counted in Port Colborne? Because certainly OHIP could track where I live. And so I'm a Port Colborne resident who has a doctor, albeit it's not in Port Colborne. Like, is anybody else expressed that concern that we're operating with numbers that, like, you could add another 4 physicians to make up that 6,000 people. So that, off the bat, I could be saying, well, no, you don't. You need 8 doctors using your method. Notwithstanding, if I can throw one other thing in, you have, and I don't know if there was any other on the chart, but you have a population of 6,000 next door in Waynfleet, right, who on the list have no doctors. Well, you and I everybody on this dais knows there's people from Waynfleet that have a family doctor space in Port Colborne. So, is the shortage 4? Is the shortage 8 to make it up? Is the shortage another 5? Well, for argument's sake, say Welland people take half of Wainfleet and we take the other half. Like, it just seems we're playing in a very loose world.
Jill?
Yep. Through the mayor, I 100% agree with you, and I don't know if there is a data set that gives you the exact amount. And I know that the Inspire data that was recently quoted through the Toronto Star, their data showed 53,000 that were unattached within our NOHT catchment. So again, different populations, and I guess that's why I compared the two data sets because, and again, they're two data sets that both have caveats, but there isn't an exact number, and it's changing all the time as well as people are, going off rosters, they're moving away, they're moving. It's an impossible amount to actually pinpoint. But if you do look at Wainfleet, I believe that their number is 5. So, and they do come into Port Colborne, which probably, or Dunnville, which affects that as well. We don't necessarily know where they're seeking their care. So, again, and I think the way I title it is capacity. So it shows the physician capacity in Port Colborne that, again, they only have the capacity to roster, half of the population. So definitely, we do need more doctors in Port Colborne. If there are 0 doctors that are accepting patients here and there's, a significant portion of the population that's maybe seeking their care even in St. Catharines, we know that they have a higher percentage of doctors that are within retirement age. So when they do retire and people are wanting to come back to Port Colborne to look for a doctor, there may not be one unless we add to that complement. So it kind of, there's many caveats to all of the data. I think we need to look at this kind of at a fulsome, bird's eye view, and again, come up with a regional strategy that's going to work for us. This data is probably a little more accurate just because we are surrounded by 3 bodies of water. The people in Fort Erie are not going to go to Buffalo for their care, and the people in Niagara-on-the-Lake are not, So we really only have that one border where people could be going to Dunnville or could be going to Stony Creek to get their care and vice versa. So I think that provincially this is probably, we're in a position to maybe have a little more accuracy with that number. But again, there's caveats in all of the data sets. So I hope that answers your question.
Councillor?
That's fine. I don't know what the last thing, and it's not for Jill, but for, I don't know whether Ron will remember what Wainfleet was a contributor. Then they bowed out, and I don't know if it's time maybe for a re-ask now that the market's gotten even tighter, but just something I'll throw by the 3 of you that are involved in. Thank you, Joe. It was great. Thank you, Brett.
Thanks. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Jill and Bram, sorry. When you take a look at the physician recruitment stats, where are our physicians coming from? And if you back out McMaster, Ontario, and Canada outside of Ontario, so you throw out Canada as a whole, we basically only draw from 2 other countries, well, the UK and the US. Is our search for physicians going to expand to other countries? And I think I heard that the federal government was going to look at recognizing competency from other countries as well. It just seems that we're so limited in our search field that does that hinder the recruitment process?
Jill?
So through the mayor, so for family medicine, there are limited jurisdictions that we can draw from that have medical programs that equate to Canadian programs. So that limits us to the US, the UK, Ireland, and Australia. So that's where we're seeing them from, is because they can easily transfer. They write from the US. They've now made the changes that they no longer need any exams. They can apply directly to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario and have and start practicing immediately. In the UK, they've also made similar changes, so they can easily come into Canada without writing any exams if they're board certified. Ireland, that is likely on the horizon. Australia also likely on the horizon. So that's really why we're targeting those countries, because of easy licensure.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, is there anything on the horizon where we will, I would say, investigate into other countries?
Jill?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the province has recently announced a practice-ready assessment program where they're now kind of mirroring what other provinces are doing in some of their northern communities, where they allow physicians to practice under supervision for a period of time with a return of service contract. Those are often outside of the Commonwealth jurisdictions. So once they are licensed in a northern community, they're kind of free, and after they've worked through their return of service contract, then they can actually practice anywhere within that province. If they want to move out of the province, they can apply for licensure within another province as well through the trade agreement. So it is another pathway for them. However, I don't believe that Niagara is on the radar for that practice-ready assessment program. It'll likely be for more of the northern communities who are dire for family doctors.
Councillor? Great, thank you. Further questions? Jill, again, thank you very much. And Jill's working with our working group for healthcare within Port Colborne. She came and gave us this presentation the other evening. We will be talking to Jill a lot with her knowledge in this aspect of what we're putting together for a path forward. Because as you guys know, it's 2028 where the UCC totally closes in Port Colborne. So looking at primary health care within Port Colborne, things we have talked about are walk-in clinics, family health organizations, working with our current doctors, recruiting new doctors, bringing in nurse practitioners and others, and really making sure that what is in Port Colborne by 2028 is a wholesome healthcare program for everyone here. So, you know, we are working very hard with this committee, and it actually, quite frankly, it'll look to grow by a couple of people very shortly, with a couple of other experts that we're asking to come on. You know, we are working very, very hard to make sure that, you know, we're putting realistic expectations forward within our healthcare community for the city of Port Colborne. So again, Jill and Bram, thank you very much. So this time, if I could have Councillors Bruno and Baggio move that Chief Administrative Office Report 2023-92 be received. Any questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.2 is the 2023 Trimester 1 financial reporting. Mr. Bowles has a presentation. Mr. Bowles?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I guess the air conditioner right beside me is not the one that's working. I see that. Okay, so T1, Council might remember that last year we talked about expanding our regular reporting, and we'd introduced a T1 regular report. With T1, what we try to do is give just a high-level commentary with respect to, do we think our budget is going to meet our forecasts, and at this point in time we do. And then we go into greater detail with capital. So I'll go through a couple of these slides and stop about halfway through and ask Council for any comments going forward. So my first slide is really just the agenda that kind of really highlights that a lot of this presentation will talk about the capital budget and the recommendation, because there are a couple recommended changes to the capital budget from staff. I highlight here, and I think maybe tonight we're a little bit out of order, because I think one of the reports on tonight is actually to talk about approving the new strategic plan of Council. So we've tried to incorporate that strategic plan right into our slides. And so maybe I won't go too in depth on this slide, and I'll save it for Gary as he gets to his report and our manager of strategic planning. But by and large, our mission statement stays the same: to provide an exceptional small town experience in a big way. The strategic pillars, which will be talked about, I think, in a presentation to come later tonight, with respect to the new 5 strategic pillars to which Council will be discussing potentially approving tonight. Now, just a quick update on the levy, and as mentioned, this presentation at T1 is really about capital because we're only about 4 months into the year, and staff still believe that budget is the best forecast at this point in time. But we are seeing higher interest rates. We just point out to Council that we do anticipate investment income to be higher than originally budgeted. And we also highlight here some of the transfers from capital from reports that Council has approved during the course of the year. You can see the Nickel Beach parking lot, Valley Roof, H.H. Knoll Bridge, Sugarloaf Archaeological Research, and Neff Water Main Construction, all approved through Council. So just at a high level, levy it right now, we still anticipate that the budget is our best forecast, and we are on budget to have a balanced budget this year. And on the rate side, really, we did do that change with respect to the vacant land. Maybe it wasn't a change, but we did notify Council that as we did our audit of who was being charged the vacant land charges, we noted that there were a number of properties that hadn't been previously picked up. And in picking those up, that will create a surplus, which will help fund the capital budget going forward on the wastewater budget. Now, really what staff is looking in T1 to update Council on is capital and related projects. And we put this slide together, and then you'll see in your report there is an appendix. I believe the appendix is Appendix B that has every project laid out individually, but this is the projects at a very high level. You'll see we started the year with about 90 projects. We had about 49 projects approved in the capital budget. During the course of the year, there was another 6 projects between the beginning of the year and now that were approved by Council for a total of 145 projects. Public Works and other departments have closed out 20 of them. This is as of the April date, April 30th. Projects closed out or transferred. There were a couple of projects that we amalgamated, and there's a slide that shows a couple of those projects that I'll show shortly. In total, there was 117 projects that we still have on the books. So about 20 of the projects to date, 20% of the projects to date have been completed. And again, that was as of April 30th. And I'll just present this next slide and then ask if there's any questions. Specifically with respect to those projects, we had a detailed meeting with Public Works, finance staff and Public Works did, and they had noted that there's 21 more projects that will be done by August 30th, and then there'll be 64 more done by T3, which will be the end of the year, which is December 31st, leaving 32 projects at the end of the year. And when we come back with T2, we will show this slide and we'll show how accurate we were with those projections going forward. And I think that's part of the process going forward, is establishing a benchmark and seeing if we've achieved that benchmark. So in total, that 117 projects, we anticipate by the end of the year, 27% of the projects will be ongoing into the next year. And we took a quick look at those projects, and many of those projects have been identified as multi-year projects in the capital budgets. So I think Council will appreciate some of our water and wastewater projects that have been approved are 2 or 3 year projects, so they're not all going to get done in 1 year. At that slide, I think I could take a pause if there's any questions on projects so far.
Councillor Elliott, so enthusiastically.
Yeah, just because you triggered something going through this. Do we track our projects? Sorry, Mark, through to Brian. Do we track our projects based on the year that we expect them to be completed, or do we just do them year over year? We've budgeted for a project, we know it's going to take 3 years, but because it started in 2023, it's an open project, but we know it's not going to be finished for 2 or 3 years. And why would we track all of that and not just track the projects that we opened in the year or were carried over because they weren't completed last year, and we targeted to finish that project in this calendar year?
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, I think staff really appreciate that question, and that's why we introduced this new column called multi-year projects, because we want to break those out. Historically, they've always been together, and council, I think, has always said, well, there's a lot of projects that aren't done. But some of those projects we anticipated would take 3 or 4 years. Right now, there's a $5 million project that is about 66% funded from the federal government for some water mains. And that project is going to go on until 2026. So to think that it's not closed isn't necessarily, I think, a fair representation of the project, because the project was never intended to be closed. And that's where this was kind of our introduction to say that there are projects that are on a multi-year basis, and we'll continue to break that out onto a separate slide at the next, we'll give you even greater detail of that multi-year column in the next update at T2. So I appreciate the councillor for bringing it up, and staff will continue to drill down on that for council to see more detail on it.
Yeah.
Councillor?
I just think, thank you for that. I just think that it would serve us and staff more if we could see your tangible results in the calendar year that you thought. And then if, not that there's any department we want to pick on, but if somebody's having trouble meeting the benchmark to complete the projects, what do we need to do to provide them with the tools to complete more projects on time, instead of looking at this going, well, you only completed 20%, but the other 80% were 2 or 3 year projects. Well, you basically completed 100% of your projects in the calendar year that you knew could be done in the calendar year. So yeah, if we could do that moving forward, that would be a really great way to track. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bagia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To use me, Mr. Mayor, to Brian, as we're talking about projects, I thought of one, I tried to look it up, I still can't find it. It's front counter downstairs, the customer service counter. Do we change the name of it, or do we get rid of the project, or is it not on this list?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, it's actually on the next slide, and we're saying that we can reduce the budget on that. We just had a walkthrough today, and we did have an AODA audit of the city go through, and they identified that there actually isn't an AODA issue with respect to the councillor, with respect to the front counter. It didn't actually come up as an AODA issue. So, but that's not to say that we're not going to make improvements to the front counter. And the supervisor of facilities and one of the new project managers and council, remember in the last budget, we had 2 individuals leave the city, and then we repurposed those positions to create the first project managers of the city. So that's one of the reasons why we're moving, I think, quickly through some of these projects, because we have people dedicated for them. So City Hall staff and Public Works did do that walkthrough today, now that we have the AODA audit done, and that project will continue. There still will be an improvement to the front counter, but we're not doing it necessarily because there's an AODA concern.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, only because this project is probably year 2000 or even earlier, and it's still, it just seems to get changed every time somebody brings it up. Oh, we're going to change that now. We're not going to have the wheelchair counter level. We're not going to have the private little conference room. You know, we had change of staff, so we're going to have to look at it all over again. So it just seems it drags on and on, Mr. Mayor. And it's time to get something done on that, rather than just walkthroughs every 6 months or every year, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor, wasn't in 2000. It doesn't go back that far, believe me. No. What year did this? What year did it come forward? I think it was just before the pandemic, was it not?
Through the councillor to the councillor and council. So it was discussed verbally by council just before the pandemic. It was actually approved in the 2022 capital budget.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I think we got a $96,000 government grant for that. And I still have the records at home. I can bring them in, Mr. Mayor.
And I think you'll see that on the next slide where they're proceeding with that. So, further questions at this time? Councillor?
On the reworking of the downstairs, is that coming up here? Or are you gonna share what changes are being made with council at some time?
Yeah,
Brian?
through the mayor to council. So when we did the AOD audit, we noted that we didn't need the front counter. The washrooms are AODA accessible, and that front, like kind of glass room that people were talking about, staff have identified that if council desires, and we've recommended cutting it, we can operate without it, which will save about $100,000. It still leaves $120,000 to get a better front counter process. It still leaves the funding available to improve that total entrance experience, but and the AODA points that were identified on the first floor, including some things about lighting on the first floor. So it's not that staff are saying that we don't want more, but what we're actually saying is the rules don't require us to do more, and we're recommending that we save $100,000 and utilize it on other projects going forward, where we might have other AODA concerns or other issues going forward.
Councillor?
So we had kind of a draft plan there of what was going to be done. So can we get a little rub out this section and it's not going to happen plan, you know, just to look at what's going to be done?
Yeah,
Brian?
through the mayor to council, we can absolutely get something put together so you can see what is going to be done.
I don't need it to scale or anything. On the back of a napkin's okay. I just want to know what the heck it's going to look like, that's all.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'll just jump in.
Yeah,
Your
go
worship,
ahead.
to Councillor Bodnar and I guess to Councillor all of council. You know, that's a project that came 3 or 4 years ago, almost conceptual. I don't think ever approved by council. It really took on a life of its own, if I remember historically. I think there was some assurances from government representatives from our ridings above the city that we were a slam dunk to get some grant money. I don't have a figure in front of me. I vaguely recall, don't know if it's 1.2 or 2.1 million dollars. We were going to build offices on the second floor. We were going to open new committee rooms. We were going to do a lot of work, tiles and carpets and paint and windows and color changes. And when that grant money didn't materialize, it meant that the taxpayers of Port Colborne were paying for that project, or we were taking on debt, debenture, which is still paid for by the taxpayers, or we were scaling back. And I think the project number that you see on slide 10 of Appendix A is the approved project from council, and it's 22C PW B12. 22C means it was approved in 2022. So I think there was some concepts, I think there was some general discussion, but I don't think there was ever funding until 2022. I look to the treasurer to correct me if I'm wrong. It's an old building. It's 27-ish years old. It needs TLC. I was just talking to staff today about areas where carpet and paint are required to be tuned up. We try to do that when the office is closed with the contractor, for example, Christmas and so on. We do our maintenance. But, you know, I'm sort of surprised to hear council say that there is not enough here, because we were trying to be frugal at the staff level and make sure that we put the money where the taxpayers will benefit the most. Roads, sidewalks, trees, parks, AODA in those buildings is important, community halls. But we certainly can take another look, and we do want to do work at City Hall. The second thing that happened, and I'll just, sorry to take so long, Mr. Mayor, a friend of mine is the CAO of Brantford, and they talk about the massive City Hall they were going to build in 2019, and that all changed in 2020 when the workplace and workplace dynamics changed. In 2019, we had a full parking lot, and we had people with no offices here. in the time since then, we've been able to deploy some furniture, do some rearranging of the space that we do have, and make sure that there's a desk for anyone. We do have some people who work from home. We do have some people who work in different sites like the Public Works Building and so on. So there isn't as much pressure on us to house those people in City Hall, and there's not as much pressure on us to save that money. So it is something that maybe can be the subject of further discussion, but for now, the only money that we have in the budget, other than the treasurer here is saying there's some savings to be realized versus what's going to be built versus what was approved in 2022. The only money we have is that 2022 allotment for capital. We don't have that grant money that was originally contemplated.
Councillor Bruno.
Thank you. I remember all of that vividly myself. For me at the time, the extra money was there. They were upgrades that would certainly improve the quality of the building. But my focus was on that counter, and what I recall was going to be a privacy room for when there's issues, particularly in treasury or tax bills, things like that to go into. So I guess my concern was not so much this reduction as the CAOs outlined, but Mr. Bowles, when you said it was staff reviewed this and decided that, I guess what I'm concerned of, you've dealt with the counter. I'm willing to put aside all the other niceties that could have happened, but just on that privacy room, is that a decision that is in conjunction with, we needed that room for either irate customers or the ability to have privacy, and now staff has said we no longer have that need, that need somehow is dissipated, whether it's how we handle things or whatever. But I guess my concern was that's sort of the one that's not gotten much attention in tonight's discussion. It was really the other two. So is that staff saying that we don't need a quiet room, or we don't need a privacy room to deal with citizens?
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, I appreciate it. It's kind of like a difficult balancing act how to explain this, because staff is a general word, and it makes reference that, I think as Councillor Bagu said, staff have changed. So the staff that are here now that were here before never requested it. But the staff that's not here requested it.
All right. Any further? Okay, continue.
Sorry. So when we look at some of the recommendations, so staff went through and looked at how do we move and keep moving forward. One of the projects that came up was the urban forest management plan. So that project started, we have about 1/5 of it done. We budgeted for 1/5. It is integral to our strategic plan, where we talk about our total canopy of the city with respect to our environmental goals. And what we've looked at in working with this project, if we were to budget accordingly that we have on the slide, we'd be able to get the other 4/5 of the city done by year end and be ready to go with our coming forward with a tree planting strategy to keep expanding the tree coverage of the city. The next project is, there was a budget for Valley Health and Wellness air unit. With respect to that project, it is looking to be over budget. We would fund it from our over-under reserve when we close out a capital project, and we're normally under budget when we do a capital project. We close it out to that reserve. We're looking to actually utilize it to get that project done. The next one is Neff Street outlet retrofit. When that budget was put forward, it was really for the design side. Public Works, and we have our Director of Public Works here, might be able to speak to it if there's any questions, but that's moving along, that design's moving along really well, and we didn't anticipate council wanting to wait on it once the design was done, so we're putting forward that we would move forward with that project. As we were talking about City Hall AODA renovations, We can still handle the anticipated renovations within that area with the budget if we were to reduce it, and then those funds can be repurposed to other projects. Formally or informally, I have mentioned to council that with respect to the Nickel Beach capital upgrades, while council did approve a larger number for the Nickel Beach capital upgrades, specifically around the parking lot, I verbally identified that the budget would be significantly less. This just formally actually reduces that budget. That's what we'd be doing here. Library elevator modernization. The library elevator has proven to be a little more complicated than the one at City Hall with respect to the type of floors and how it's working. So we would look to utilize that reserve to get that project done. H.H. Knoll Park Trail expansion. There was a report that came to council that received a lot of positive feedback at the last council meeting, and Councillor Bagu, I think, was the councillor that identified it'd be nice if we could move some of these trail improvements even faster. So this would actually give us the ability to move it faster in the fall. And then the last one is the YMCA has been a great partner. They really haven't had a number of capital requests as we've been going forward, but they do have an opportunity with respect to scheduling at the beginning of September to get their to get a project done with respect to pool retiling or grouting, and that is a regular maintenance project that has to happen. We haven't had to pay for this in a number of years, and we'd recommend getting this done right here. I will say they are looking, just for council for an update, they are looking at the lockers, and they are looking at potentially looking at helping us arrange for painting or some wrapping of some of the lockers, because you'll see there is some rust on some of the lockers as well. That was the other capital item they pointed out, but we're trying to see if we can deal with that through operations. And then there is, this next slide just really talks about a couple projects that they're budgeted individually because they were budgeted in different years, but they're really the same project that's continuing on, or we're adding to the budget. The one is the pump. It was budgeted on both the water and the wastewater, but now that we're actually buying the trailer mount pumps, we would like to just consolidate and do the one purchase. And then the video surveillance program, which is, I know council has had some updates over a period of time. We are looking at a camera system. We do have that final contract going through right now, and the initial test cameras will go up at Nickel Beach this summer, so we can test them out. And if those cameras work, and we'll let council have the opportunity to check out the app and see how that works, and if we're happy with it, then we can move forward to more. And I know some of the councillors have actually already seen the technology at one or two of the different conferences that councillors may have come across. So those are kind of the capital adjustments. Maybe I just take a quick pause there because we were having some chat. Yeah.
Councillor Bruno.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe to Steve on this one. Steve, those two 6-inch pumps, trailer mounted, those ones that we were talking about that were back ordered, and that?
Yes, through your worship, to Councilor Bruno, those are the two that were back ordered, and they have arrived at the operations center.
Right. So I guess, Mr. Bowles, if I could ask you, were you, that was budgeted for, they've just arrived. Is it here because we've reallocated? Wouldn't it just be, I'm not sure why it's there, why it just doesn't close out like the many list of other things?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor. It's a good question. It's a timing question. So the report was done as of April 30th. So the idea was to combine it because we didn't know what the receipt date is. And the director of public works got on the phone and pushed it. So now he has them. So we're kind of in this weird timing thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions? You're done?
Just a couple quick slides.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So through the mayor to council, a couple more slides. Just give you a forecast with respect to reserves. I'll just highlight that the forecasted balance that's circled there of 19.8 million, that's kind of more consistent with previous years. Our opening balance in reserves is a little bit higher because we had purposely put some funding aside with respect to getting the Valley Health and Wellness roof done. So now that we've paid it, the dollar figure is a little bit lower. And just as a reminder, and I know we've talked to council before about it, WIP stands for work in progress. So that's the capital funds that you've set aside for approved projects. And you can see, based on the projects that Public Works is doing, they're getting the projects done. So right now they're forecasting to have a significant portion of that funds utilized by the end of the year. So that's moving forward, and I figured council would want to know that as we're starting to talk about the 2024 budget soon. And then the other slide, and this, these are just last two slides on debt management. I just really wanted to be clear with respect to why finance brings forward these debt management slides. We bring them forward not because we're saying, hey, the dollar figure or the debt in the city is going down, and that's necessarily the direction that we want it to. It's great to bring debt down, but we're also bringing it forward as an information for council and the public to realize that as the INS project gets completed and the identification of storm sewers and wastewater projects get identified, the city does have the ability to borrow to fix its water and wastewater systems. So as those projects come forward to council, you do have the ability within your budget and within your provincial regulations and own regulations to do that. So it's a good news story because we've been paying down the debt and it's been paying down aggressively. But that also gives the city the ability to, as the projects get identified, to have meaningful impact on inflow and infiltration to get that done. And that's what these last two slides are.
Councillor Bruno.
So we have to talk about the self-imposed limit, the provincial limit, and the max. So what ability does the city of Port Colborne, I'm not suggesting we max out, but what borrowing room does the city of Port Colborne have and is still on side with the province?
Through the mayor to the councillor, and council, we've received our ARL update. The province gives us one every year, and it suggests that we can borrow up to get to that provincial max, up to $100 million. So there is, and this is what I put forward to council, there is the ability, should the projects meet the internal rate of return or the to actually identify that they'll have a significant impact on the wastewater or storm system, for council to be able to approve them because you have the ability to issue that debt.
Thank you. Great. Further questions? Councillor Baggett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess to Brian, you're done with your presentation, even up to investments, I imagine, right? I have a question on investments, that's all. Or were you going to keep going ahead, or?
No, through the mayor, I was just going to say looking forward, but any questions on investments? Yep, that's an appendix to the report.
Right. Yeah. I do have I guess a comment and a question, Mr. Mayor. Through our institutions we deal with, because everybody in this room and residents of Port Colborne know the Bank of Montreal is about to abandon our city and go to Walla, Mr. Mayor, and you've tried in the past, you've tried personally in the past to keep them here, which worked for a while, but personally I think it's just personal greed or company greed that's making you move to Welland. And I guess my question and comment is it morally right, I guess, for this council or our city to sort of omit the Bank of Montreal and some of the investments, our renewal of GICs? Can we go to other financial institutes that are in our municipality more than that? So, like I said, it's a moral question. I don't want to blackball anybody, but
I'll let our
pass it out.
Through the mayor,
can I answer that?
Through the mayor to the councillor and council. So I think it's important to understand the process to which we use. We go out when we do those GICs or any of the investments, and we do a quoting system. So we have everybody quote on the rate to which they give, and the winning rate wins that bid. So And that's how we've been able to achieve some of the rates. You can see some have gotten up to 6% in recent times. So I can tell you that on every one of those BMO certificates, the rate was considerably higher on those bids. And that would be the question that council would then have to consider, the lost interest revenue for that decision.
You're right, Council. It's a dilemma because you want to do right by your taxpayer and try to get as much bang for your investment as you can. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and there are other institutions that we've dealt with in the past that don't have a branch here. We've talked to them about trying to move some branches here, but they've given us good service, good returns where, you know, you got to look at it and say, yeah, you know, chicken the egg thing. If they haven't been here and you want them to move here, if they're in Niagara, is that an incentive for a credit union or a bank to actually open up a new avenue for the municipality? But I agree with what you're saying. It's not the easiest thing.
I guess it's not like giving incentive for a doctor to come to Port Colborne. So, I do understand we have to be fiscally responsible for our residents, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further to Mr. Bowles? Seeing none, if I could have councillors Bruno and Bagu move that the Corporate Services Department Report 2023-114 be received for information, and that the recommended transfers to and from the city's capital closeout account outlined in Appendix B of Corporate Services Report 2023-114 be approved. Further questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Council. .3 is Water Wastewater Bylaw Update 2023-119. Mr. Bowles will give a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting me have two presentations tonight. That one was maybe a little easier to get through. There are some interesting topics in here. We're going to talk a lot about equity tonight, and I'm going to stop kind of throughout and we can have some conversations and ask some questions. So the first thing I want everybody to recognize, anybody that's watching with respect to this, is there is no rate changes that impact a single family house in here. So if you're a house and you're in Port Colborne, nothing what we're talking about tonight actually changes your rate. What we're talking about is the equity to what those houses pay compared to what other properties might pay. Now, I thought before we got started, I'd just remind council, and I know everybody reads this budget more than any budget with great detail going forward, but just some of the analytics of the rate budget. On water, we get about 46% of our funding from variable, and we get about 54% from fixed, whereas on wastewater, we get about 91% from the fixed charge. And the reason we get the majority of those fees from fixed charges on wastewater is we've all gone through the presentations. 80% of everything that goes to the wastewater facility has nothing to do with your household usage. Is everything to do with inflow and infiltration. So one person could leave, or a business or a commercial business or industrial business could leave their water on, and it would really not move the needle on the wastewater. It is I&I, and it's the storm sewers, and we've talked about this. 1/3 of the cities has storm sewers that work. The other 2/3 of the city in the urban area doesn't have storm sewers that are working, and that's what council is working on addressing, and that's why council has approved a $32 million grant application to move forward through the DMAFRA grant. So that's kind of where the fixed and that ratio are. And then on the next one, really gets into, you know, who pays the water bill and who pays the wastewater bill. And you can see on the water bill, almost 70% is paid from residential, but when you go to the wastewater bill, about 80% is paid on residential. And if you look kind of closely there, you can see what the differential is. Industrial pays about 18% on water but only 6% on wastewater. And that's because we have a number of high water users, industrial, that have their own wastewater facilities, and they clean their own wastewaters. Oh, this slide comes in really poorly. That's like, I guess we had internet issues earlier, and now we have some extra stuff on this slide. Maybe a little bit hard to see at home. I know the presentation's online. I was able to print it off online myself, so please do take a look. This identifies, there's a study that goes on in the province every year. It's called the BMA study. They compare the Niagara region wastewater rates. They compare us to a number of other municipalities, 132 other municipalities that partake. And what you can see is, when it comes to commercial industrial, we're actually slightly below. And that has everything to do with how our fixed versus variable allocation works. We do fixed versus variable that represents true fixed costs and true variable costs. So we're slightly below on commercial industrial. So that creates a very competitive environment. On residential, we are above, and that's what some of the equity that we're going to talk about today might be able to address going forward. But I did think Council would find it interesting with the 132. We aren't the highest wastewater rates in the province with respect to this study. There's actually a municipality that's more than $1,000, I think, above us going forward. So we do have higher rates, and we'll talk about that as we go forward, but not necessarily the highest. The rate bylaw updates. So again, the goal here for everything we're going to talk about is to shrink that residential gap. We want to talk about what investments can be made with respect to infrastructure and building storm sewer, and by shrinking the residential gap differential, those funds can go into those investments. Billing equity between water and wastewater bylaw and how it exists right now, and then we have the three updates to consider. So I'll stop after I walk through the first update, and we'll talk about that once I get through here. So first observation is, infrastructure is important to any resident unit, and it's a shared cost. We have to all recognize that it's a shared cost, it's in the ground, it's a fixed cost. As I've mentioned already, 80% of the charges for wastewater have everything to do with inflow and infiltration. So the billing concern that's been brought forward is that a single-family home pays significantly more than a unit in a multi-residential property, yet both have the same problem if the wastewater doesn't go away. And that really has become the question that we're trying to answer here. The other one is, we've now had developments that have come forward that want to talk about a meter pit, where the city would have a meter, and then after the meter, everything would be private. So all those homes would be on a private meter. And council has to remember, the way we do our billing is based on our meter. So if our meter is the meter pit, and then you had 100 units after that meter pit, we would only charge on our meter. You wouldn't charge on the other 100 units that might come after that meter pit. And that can create inequity, because for all of the single-family homes we have in the city, we have 1 meter per home, not 1 meter for 100 homes. But that's what a meter pit could potentially create for the city of Port Colborne. So this is all about talking about the equity of that. And I try to do some numbers, and really we used averages in trying to do the numbers. So you could take the 5 units and you could say, okay, well, what's the variable cost for 10 units? You would really just times it by 2, because it would be twice as many units. And what you'd ultimately find is, and what I have in these slides here, is the average home will pay about $682 for water. And I used 193. I know in a lot of our literature we say it's 150. We've now done and updated all the analytics, and we found the average house is actually at 193 right now, meters cubed of water. So they'd pay $682, and wastewater current would be at $1,000. And that $1,000 rate hasn't gone up in 2 years. So then we go and look at what a multifamily, so let's say you're in a property and there's like 5 units in that property. Each one of those units, each one of those families in those units would only pay $200 for water, and they'd pay $300 for wastewater. Yet everybody has the same problem, and everybody wants water to get to them. And that's kind of where the question becomes with respect to what we're talking about here tonight. So the consideration here is, one, equity is important, and two, multi-residents, whatever recommendation is, should still receive a benefit for the intensification that exists with respect to multi-res. So the proposal that staff have here is really, one, let's not reinvent the wheel. You just have to look at our neighbor, Welland. They actually have looked at this years ago, and they've adjusted their system. They actually use a charge of 70 to 82, 86%, depending on the number of units. What we're actually recommending is, based on the stats that we have here, and I apologize, there's a lot on this slide, but the average multi-residential unit will use about 45% of what a single-family house will be used. The median, because I know Councillor Beauregard always asks me about the median, it says that 70%. So the median home or multi-res unit will use 70% of what the what a single multi-family home would use. So we've looked at this, we've talked, we've learned from the Welland example. Staff are proposing that we would adjust our fee model to a 50% charge of what a single family home is, once you got to 3 units and above. And one of the reasons, or you can see the reasons here, that we would still recommend the 50% charge is one, and we're only recommending to start at 3 units, is, well, 50 plus 50 gets you to that 100. So if you have 2 units, you have a duplex, you're still paying the same. You could say it started at 2 and it's 50-50, but you get to the same number. So that was one of the components. The next one is having some variation at the 50% will allow for some fluctuation, because the average might be 45 now. It can go to 55, it can go to 40, it will fluctuate. What we did wanted to make sure is working from the average of 50% as the main floor, and with the median being at 70%, we're recognizing that that still allows for council to be positive with respect to the intensification that is promoted through building multi-residence and the benefits that that can have for land use planning. So I'll just go what this would look like before we take questions. Is the fee for a water would go to $326, and the fee for wastewater would go from $501 under this scenario. And what that would mean for the city budget to be able to tackle infrastructure going forward, it's about $119,000 on the water budget. It's $362,000 on the wastewater budget, impacting about 1,100 homes or units, not homes, but units within the city. And we wouldn't recommend anything to happen until January 1, 2024. We're in the middle of the cycle, of the billing cycle. Council's approved its budget. We're not talking about adjusting the budget right now. This is just about looking forward. So that's the overview of what our first observation is that we want to talk to council and get council's input on.
Okay, questions on this?
I can't wait to have questions on this. This is like the stone in my shoe that won't go away, that's agitating me. And expand on this. 1,133 units classified as multi-res. Estimated impact is 119,362. Impacted how?
That would be the impact, that'd be the increase to the infrastructure budget, because that's where staff would recommend the additional funding, the change in funding would go, so that way council could tackle the infrastructure deficit that exists.
So you're saying that 1,133 units are going to be increased in cost to that amount. That extra money is coming to us at 50% of what single-family homes are being charged?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councilor, if we charged a unit 50% of what a single-family home gets charged, it would generate that much additional income.
So what are they paying now?
Through the mayor, I'll just go back. So right now they're paying $203 per unit, and they would be paying, an individual unit would be paying $320 going forward, which is still 50% of what anybody that owns a house would be paying.
Okay. So homeowners single-family homeowners in the city have been subsidizing multi-units for the last number of years significantly, to the tune of, the other slide, $500,000. So we're playing catch-up. But in a single-family home like mine, and maybe a lot of people in here, there's 2 people live in that house. So if there's 2 people live in my house, and there's 2 people live in a multi-unit building, why do they get to pay 50% less than what I have to pay?
So through the mayor to the councillor, I think that's why staff bring this forward. It's something that there's been a lot of discussion at. Councillors have brought this question forward, and we bring this forward to council to talk about. The reason we came with the 50% allocation was because we found on average those individuals in a multi-unit house do use less water. So what we've tried to do is, based on the questions that council and others have asked, we've tried to provide some science or with respect to that 50% allocation. But staff do point out that it, like the median is actually 70%, and another city is actually above that as well. Now, if I can just take one more step and say, if the councillor is asking, well, why don't we go to 70%? Staff also took the view, and maybe that a paced adjustment might be more appropriate than an all-in adjustment. And that's where the 50%, that was another reason for the 50%.
Okay. Because when I take a look at the 1,133 multiple units in high-density buildings that we have, how many single-family homes are in town?
Yeah, through the mayor, we have 6,000 properties. I would have to double check that. I probably should have had that for this presentation to tell you, but there is significantly more. The multiplier is exponential.
Yes, so.
These are water users, so Ward 4 isn't included.
Right, so 6,000 plus. So you're looking at, give or take 6 times the amount of single-family homes as opposed to multi-residential units, which, yeah, that would configure the ratio of, they use 45% less. Well, you've got many more single-family homes as compared to single units. And the one thing that bothers me is we're only going to charge multi-residential buildings 50%, but we're charging vacant lots 100% that aren't even part of the system.
No, that's not true.
We do have a vacant lot bylaw, do we not? That we're charging the fixed cost on how much?
Yeah, Mr. Bowles? Mr. Bowles?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I'll try to interject a little bit, because there is, I think, a nuance to recognize. When you have a multifamily home or a multifamily residence, let's call it, you do have that economic benefit that have been built, right? Because now you're getting property taxes off of the property. The water and wastewater charge isn't, they give you a multiplier because there's a number of units. So it's not like, I think it's hard to say that it's apples and apples comparing this to a vacant property, because a vacant property might be 1,000, but still remember, I guess in the one example here, like a multi-res home, the fixed charge would be $2,255 in this example. So just with 5 units, your multi-res charge off of that piece of land would be double what a vacant property would be charging. So I think you have to look at it in the totality of the property, not just an individual unit on that.
But through you,
Councillor?
But you've got 5 units contributing that are using the system, that are sending water to the treatment plant, that are using treated water, right, against a vacant property that we are charging the fixed cost 100% on vacant land that's not on the system. Am I correct?
Through the mayor to the council, I disagree because it is on the system. It is abutting the system, and that's what update number 3 will be talking about.
So I'll rephrase it. They're not connected to the system right now. So they don't contribute, nor do they use. They don't draw water. They don't create wastewater.
I guess through the mayor to the councillor, I think if we want to talk about vacant land, I get the councillors trying to draw a correlation between a multi-res and why does multi-res pay only 50 and somebody else pays 100 on the vacant. I think that's the question that council needs to address. If council wants this rate to go up, staff have thought of a response to that. If council wants this to be up, staff would recommend doing it over a phase of 2 years if you went to the median. If you adjusted this rate to the median at the 70%, we would recommend that council do it over 2 years and not 1.
Okay, and I guess the final question I have is, you just stated that 70% of the cost of wastewater is I&I.
Through the mayor, to 80%.
80%? Even better.
Yeah.
So 80% of the water that gets treated is through no user's fault. But single-family homes have to pay a greater percentage of the water that nobody contributed to the system than the multi-unit residential did. So the single-family homes pay more of a percentage of I&I than what the multi-residential units do. But they didn't contribute that water to the system. Do you know what I mean? So why isn't that just shared amongst all users?
Well, through the mayor to the councillor, this is why staff bring this forward, because we're trying to bring equity into it. And I think if the councillor is saying, why is the number not higher or completed, staff do point out that at some point in time you have to bring in on the equity side the fact that a piece of land has that multiplier effect with respect to the intensification, with respect to the number of floors and the amount of infrastructure to get there. So we also have to take into account that in our calculation and in our billing model somehow. And that's where not paying 100%, and that's where even in Welland's example where they don't get to 100%, acknowledges that there is a benefit to a city, a benefit to a community, a benefit to a population to bring some density to certain areas. And that's why you're not at 100%. That's why there is a lower percentage, because that piece of property, if there's 5 units on it, will produce, in this example, twice what a single-family home will do. So it does acknowledge that at some point in time a property is paying a fair share. And that's what not going to 100% is about. But staff fully recognize that the 50% we put forward, it could be at a median number. It could be at 70. But staff have put forward the 50 as the first step to introduce the concept to council so we can have this conversation to find equity in our billing system.
Okay, just one last, it's the 80% on the I&I that should be shared when you say equity. That portion, 80% of the cost, should be spread out amongst all users. Because you're penalizing if you don't charge everybody that uses the system the same proportionate cost. You're shifting that to the single family home owners as opposed to the multi-residentials. If we can shrink that 80%, that's the I&I, then everybody gets reduced. But to push that off onto single-family homes more than on the fixed cost, more than on the multi-res.
So through the mayor to the council, just to be clear, we're not shifting anything back onto single, just be clear for the tape. This whole thing is trying to shift it back in equity. But I get what the councillor is saying, and I think the other thing that we have to acknowledge is that 80% is where we are today.
Right.
And I think when you design policies and practices, we have to also take into account of where we're going. Council's approved a $32 million debt and grant project that's supposed to have significant impacts on this. A number of other projects that are ongoing that will get updated in trimester 2, and we can add in those trimester 2 some more details of some of those projects and where they are. So I think it's just something to consider as you're going forward. Where we are today may not be, and so any approval of a policy here, let's think of tomorrow too.
Okay. Yeah, very good.
Thanks, Council. Further questions? Councilor Bruno.
Mr. Bowles, I'm wondering if you would agree with this statement, because I think here's where we're getting hung up. Your first slide is no rate changes to a single-family home are proposed in this report. You could also entitle this, no longer will single-family homes be subsidizing multi-residential, Lake Canal View draw, and developable vacant land. Because right now they are. Because those people are not paying their fair share. On the Lake Canal draw, when you read the report, it says 4 industries do, 2 aren't because of an anomaly. So straightening this out, because right now, that group is not paying their fair share. And if they're not, it means somebody else is. And that's the single family, and you're agreeing with that on the multi-res thing, and I get it. But I think it blends through all this, and maybe it's easier once he gets through the report, but just to your point of, I also agree with your point that on the 80% of wastewater that should be shared by everybody. But I don't know if the 40 or the 50% that he's now assessing on multi-res, actually he's incorporating that in. Certainly they're now part of the payment. Whether they're enough part of the payment is another question.
Mr. Bowles?
I appreciate comments of both councillors, and I appreciate the engagement that we're going. To council, should I move on to number 2?
Yes.
Okay. So number 2, just it stems from a conversation that we've had with a company. They have expressed some concern because they are billed based on wastewater usage. And I think as we go through here, you'll realize that everybody's wastewater, if you're a residential or industrial property, is billed based on water usage. And we used to have all of our residents based on water usage too, but because of exactly what we were talking about, we moved it to fixed because it is a fixed cost. It's almost all I&I. So to sum this up, the reason why we have to bring this forward is we have some properties that have the ability to pull water from the canal or the lake. And they either had or they have the ability. So they have the infrastructure there. And those properties, we've had some billing practices long-standing that we always build them because we've metered or we've done some calculations with pumps of how much wastewater is coming into our system. So we always build them on actual wastewater. And the unique thing about these properties is if we had to build them on water, it always worked out to the same. We could have built them on water, we could have built them on wastewater, they would have paid the same amount. But I know this is where it gets a little confusing. Everybody pays their wastewater bills, at least if you're commercial industrial now, based on your water usage. So what we're going to talk about now is making it fair for everybody, so everybody pays on their water usage. But if, for some reason, they do pull a lot of water from the lake and they do push it into the wastewater system, we'll still monitor it and we'll do adjustment at the very end. Now, I tried to do a couple slides, which maybe I'll go really quickly because maybe they're too accountancy and they might be too much for everybody, but I'll go quick through them. So the agreements have been in place for quite some time. Our goal is to make sure everyone's billed the same. We think everybody should build on water, and if you have a special right, we should then monitor that special right, and if your bill would have been higher because of some other billing mechanism, we should adjust for that as the exception. Now, unfortunately, these slides do come through very difficult to see, which is even harder to now explain. On the far right, you can just see that a theoretical budget if you had 5 properties. And let's say the theoretical budget came to that 16,000 on the far right. And everybody, all 5 properties were all billed based on water usage. And you brought in $16,000. This next slide says, well, what if everybody was billed based on wastewater? Because you're all billed on the same metric, you all get billed the same, you have the same usage rate, so there's no impact to the budget. And then I have a slide that got kind of moved. This last slide says, well, what happens if one property gets to bill based on wastewater? And remember, in a lot of cases, the wastewater that we put down the pipe is not equivalent to the amount of water that we bought. So all the other properties have to pay based on water. This slide just identifies that that property that pays on wastewater will pay less, and all the other properties will pay more to get to the same budget. So all those 3 slides, and I apologize that for whatever reason on our Zoom they come in a little different than they came in on the published agenda. What we would like to talk about is how do we address that going forward? And this slide kind of basically says, in summary, if all companies pay based on wastewater and all residents pay on wastewater, you'll have equality because you're billing everybody the same. If you bill everybody on water usage, you'll have exactly the same. But if you start to bill some companies on wastewater usage and some companies on water usage for wastewater, you're going to have inequities. And what we're recommending here at the end of the day, our proposal is, we'd like to bill these couple companies that have had these past practices based on water. We'll bill their wastewater based on water, just like we do every other commercial industrial property. And if their wastewater usage becomes greater than their water usage, we do an adjustment at the end of the year. That's all the recommendation is. Now, the one company that this came to light with, because their wastewater usage went really down, we've had a meeting with them. They understand that we're proposing to council to make this decision. They would like us to live by the old billing and reconcile the old billing, because that's been the practice for a lot of years. But on a go-forward basis, they understand that we're going to move them to water usage billing. And the other company, they still, wastewater and water usage brings them to the same calculation. So there's really, the transition won't have an impact on the other company whatsoever. I will say, though, if we don't do the transition and accept this proposal, the one company that now has, that kind of caused this whole recommendation to come forward would see on an ongoing basis about a $100,000 reduction in their wastewater charge. And that $100,000, all other industries, all other commercial companies would come to us and say, well, we want to build the same way because we want to pay less wastewater charge. And that would cause us to completely revamp the way we bill, and we'd have to put meters for wastewater on every single industrial and commercial property, and the cost of that would be quite significant. So because it's only 2 companies that sit forward, our recommendation is bill all companies, including these 2 on water usage, for their wastewater. And going forward in December, we'd reconcile it every year, and if their wastewater does become more than water, we would go forward and do that reconciliation payment and build it right into the bylaw. That is, and I apologize, a lot of words of water, a lot of words of wastewater, a lot of word of usage. I know council's had a chance to read the report, and some councilors have reached out to me on this. I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Questions on this section? Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, now, update number 3, it gets us to Councillor Elliott's questions with respect to vacant charges. And we'll go through that and then open it up to questions. So vacant land fixed charges are for developable land abutting water and wastewater systems. They happen for a couple reasons. Municipalities do this. This is not something that Port Colborne invented. They do it because once you have water and wastewater that's abutting your land value is enhanced. Communities are looking for that land to be developed. Cities are looking for that land to be developed. And most importantly, you have assets in the ground. And those assets are going to deteriorate over a period of time. And if we aren't collecting money for the asset that's in front of your property, at some point in time, we're going to replace the asset in front of your property, but that property has never paid for the full length or the full life of that asset. So the billing concerns that have kind of come up, we've had some councilors identify and ask us, well, why do we only bill wastewater as a fixed charge and not water as well? So that was one question that came forward. The wastewater fixed charge right now is only done at the residential rate. So the question that came forward, well, what about commercial and industrial? Do they pay at the residential rate? And the answer right now is yes. So we're going to talk about maybe that should be adjusted. And the current bylaw as it sits right now, it doesn't have a mechanism for prorating. So because we bill it on the property tax bill and we bill it at the final tax bill time, a property could pay for that and then move into their property later in the year. And when they move into the property later in the year, start paying a fixed charge. So there could be a double payment. So you'll see as we go through, we're recommending that if that double payment occurs, we would refund that double payment because we don't want anybody to be charged twice. The other observation that we did find up when we look at equity in that is right now is the way the bylaw is written, it says anything that's abutting. But there are properties, and we've talked about this at council, that maybe shouldn't be charged even if they're abutting. And those are properties that would never be able to be developed. So what we're recommending if our chief planning officer says that you can't develop that property, you would be exempt from this charge going forward. So when we look at the considerations, it's about equity, making sure that when we do charge the charge, we charge everybody the same. Water and wastewater systems should be treated the same. If you're billing for the wastewater, you should be billing for the water. But again, if your property can't be developed, you shouldn't be charged it. And we should clean up the bylaw to say that. So the proposals going forward, effectively we're saying these should be effective for 2024, except for where we have to do a cleanup, or we recommend a cleanup of the bylaw. So the first is in 2024, we believe that and we put forward to council that water and wastewater both get charged, that we charge it based on property type, residential, commercial, or industrial. And effective immediately, we would adjust the bylaw to make sure that there's no duplicate payments. And if there ever was a duplicate payment, we would refund that duplicate payment immediately. And just for council to be aware, so this chart highlights the vacant land fixed charges. And this is what the differentiation would be between commercial and industrial properties. And we've done the calculation that there's about 187 properties that would be impacted by this, 167 residential, 8 commercial, 12 industrial, and the changes to the city's water budget in 2024 would be as identified here. And again, we'd be looking to support these transitions in 2024, except for the duplicate charge and undevelopable land. We would recommend that those administrative adjustments occur immediately to the bylaw. And that's my comments on number 3, and I suspect there's some questions.
Councillor Elliott.
Just one question, I promise. Industrial land. All industrial land is paying the same fixed charges regardless of size?
Yeah. Through the mayor to the councillor, when we developed this model, it was always done on property type. It wasn't done on, like, as you noted, the size of a potential industrial property. If council wants us to look at that further, we can take direction and do that. But for one of the guiding principles of all of the billing was to create simplicity, and where MPAC identifies it as industrial, we were recommending the one charge.
Counselor?
Okay, just because there was somebody that came to the Committee of Adjustment for consent, and the property that they were, one part of it's industrial, but it's only like a couple acres, as opposed to somebody that's got 50 or 60 or 100 acre industrial. That's just why I asked.
Okay. Further questions? Councillor Baggett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions for Mr. Bowles. Vacant land, fixed charges for developable land, abutting a property. Does it matter if that vacant land is severed from the, they say somebody has a house, they have an empty lot beside them, it's all one lot. It's not severed, so it's one resident. Do they pay on that empty lot beside him because it could be developable if he gets a severance? So right now they don't pay the extra?
Through the mayor to the councillor, if the property is identified distinctly and individually in the tax system, they would be charged this charge.
So my example, if I have a property on Charlotte Street, I have a lot beside me, but it's all one property. It's not severed. That's what.
Oh, yeah. So through the mayor to the councillor, if it's not severed and it's all one property, there is no charge.
Okay. Until I sever it, then it's developable. I guess that's it. Okay, but the next question is probably what a lot of other people are going to be asking. All this extra money's coming into the water and wastewater. Will that impact any of the other people's rates to go down next year, or are they paying the same rate going forward? Like nobody's rate goes down. I guess that's my question.
Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, it's a good question. In the report, we tried to address it under the financial section. Specifically, we identified that the infrastructure gap is quite significant on water and wastewater, and the recommendation is for us to be spending, I believe the report just talks about, sorry, I have it over at my other spot, about $9 million per year. And if you were to add these dollars to our current capital budget, we'd be at $2 million. So staff is recommending that this goes to add to the capital budget. Right now, as I've identified, the city has very little debt and very little debt on wastewater. So we can get to that $9 million spend if we take some of these dollars and as Public Works identifies and bring forward projects, we get those in the ground. So we're recommending it go to the capital budget where you can have the biggest impact of stopping I&I and improving your total cost of running the system.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bowles. My last point is this multi-residential. It's probably a lot of rental properties in Colborne, a lot of low rental income, low income rental properties. They're going to be hit with quite a substantial, well, the landlord is, I guess, the owner of the building. And I guess he can only raise the rates up so much per year. Like, in your opinion, is this going to force people to, I don't know, pretty well have no money to pay the extra for rent?
Bowles?
Well, through the mayor to the councillor, I don't know if I can comment on the financial situation of every individual, but what we do highlight is some properties would be under certain legislation that would impact that. The other component is that's where staff recommended going to the lower end of the range, which we had tonight a lot of conversation about what end of the range, and staff is recommending, and if council were to approve it, would approve only adjusting at this point in time to the lower end of the range. So I think some councillors have identified that potentially the true cost could be a lot higher. So I think if council were to approve this, it would be approved in such a way that you're trying to take into account that into consideration with respect to your recommendation.
Councillor?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? You're set? So council, the recommendation is that Corporate Services Department Report 2023-119 be received, that the proposed water and wastewater rates bylaw updates as outlined in Appendix A, as well as the corresponding water and wastewater rates bylaw attached as Appendix B to Corporate Services Department Report 2023-119 be approved, that the financial impacts of the proposed water and wastewater rates bylaw updates be directed to the water and wastewater capital budgets when they become effective. If I can have Councillors Bruno and Bagu move that. I do have both Councillors Bruno and Bagu on here. You've asked questions. I didn't know if you had any more.
Mine been answered.
Councillor Bagu, you're set? Okay. Further, any questions on the recommendation then? All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.4, the 2023-2026 strategic plan, the final plan, coming back to us. Mr. Long, and are you giving the presentation? No? Have questions? Okay. Thank you. So I have, well, then I'll get this on the floor now. The recommendation is that Chief Administrative Officer Report 2023-122 be received, that the 2023-2026 strategic plan be approved. If I could have Councillors Bagu and Elliott move that. Councillor Bagu, you had a question to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just waiting for it to come up. The computer's a little slow here. Just like me. Yeah. It's the actual presentation. Okay. Actually, on the actual presentation, Mr. Mayor, one thing I do appreciate the hard work for the strategic plan that's been into it by staff. It's I consider it a lot better than it was before, only because I see the word environment and climate change in it. I really appreciate that for this one. The only one I have a problem with is under measures on slide number 12, I guess it is, or 13, one and two. One of the measures is meet the benchmark of one park per 2014 residents. Currently, it's 3.4 parks per 2014 residents. Basically, what it says to me on the measures is we are going to cut back on some of the parks and recreational areas of Port Colborne. And it's also my understanding that Mr. Bowles will be bringing a report to council fairly shortly regarding Parks and Rec policies and what to do with some parks and how to enhance some, and some we may not use. I know there are some that do maybe need that we don't need right now, and I just don't like seeing it in the strategic plan, because I sort of look at this plan as the Bible, because every time staff brings a report to council, they always quote the strategic plan and how it relates to the strategic plan. And by having this in here, cutbacks on parks, without going actually through council, talking about each individual park, you know, whether we're going to keep it, whether we're going to get rid of it, or get rid of half of it, or make it bigger. I just don't like seeing this in the actual plan. If you want to change it, the wording somehow, I have no problem with that. But what you're actually asking for is a measure of decreasing the parks, which I don't agree with in this report. I don't know if you got a comment on that, or
Mr. Long.
Yes, through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. First off, appreciate the constructive comments. With respect to the parks question, what I would say is the city, as you know, councillor, has a parks and recreation master plan, and that plan is a framework for city council and staff to help us with planning and resourcing and decision-making as it relates to parks. So staff have been using that master plan as a guiding document. The discussion that staff have been having, and I should say that when I say staff, we have a cross-divisional committee of staff. The discussion we've been having has been around investing in signature parks, those parks that draw the most number of families and individuals and visitors and tourists. But we've also been having a conversation about making sure we have the right number of neighborhood parks that meet community needs. The other discussion point we've been having is around growth and development and being, I would say, thoughtful and strategic thoughtful and strategic on where a new park should be. Or in fact, do we need another park? Is there a way we could enhance an existing park that may be nearby that new development? So it is staff's intention to come forward with, I'll say, a parks plan, a parks strategy, a parks renewal strategy. Staff have developed a matrix that we're using to help with our analysis and our review and our recommendations. And we look forward to bringing that to council.
Councillor?
Thank you, Commissioner. I have no problem leaving it in, but I don't want staff to hold counsel to these measures 100%. Would that be, I guess, appropriate? Until we get a report in.
Mr. Long?
Through you, Your Worship, to the councillor, I think we take that comment under advisement. I think the measures and the projects that are in the new strategic plan, for us to achieve those measures and achieve success for that plan will be a collaborative process between council and staff. But at the same time, we've established some fairly bold KPIs to really challenge, both council and staff. But we do want that dialogue.
Councillor Borgard?
Through your worship to Mr. Long, just to address what my co-councillor Bagu has been saying, I'm wondering if we could just reword it to say something like, meet a benchmark of at least one park, or something like maintain a benchmark of at least one park per 2014 resident. That way we're not beholden to it, but it at least has that minimum of some requirement. So I think it meets kind of both. I don't know.
Work towards the benchmark.
You're something like that. It's just I think it's just a simple rewording exercise.
I read this totally opposite of you guys. I read this benchmarks would be what they're saying in there, but we actually surpassed the benchmark. So I don't look at it as we're going to cut down. I'm just saying that I read it where we surpassed benchmarks that are used across, I don't know if it's just across Niagara or across the province.
The benchmark on a case-by-case basis.
But I think that's what staff is saying. This doesn't say anything about cutting anything or enhancing anything. All it says is you have some benchmarks. I think what comes forward is the policies that Mr. Bowles, Mr. Long are going to bring forward later with regards to how we move forward with parks. There's your policy. This is a guideline. It doesn't tell you that you're going to cut parks, add parks, or whatever you're going to do. That's where the actual parks policy comes into play, which will be coming forward when, gentlemen? Approximately?
Through the mayor to council this fall.
So that's really what's going to set your standard of what you're going to do with parks. Whether it's the fall or in the new year, I mean, it's you're going to be coming forward with a new policy. That is going to be your standard, council. This isn't your standard. As I said, I read it the total opposite way you guys did. I didn't look at cutting anything right now until you actually have a policy in place. This is your strat plan, but I mean, and things have to kind of meld towards it, but it's not telling, I don't see where in that wording it's telling you to cut something. So anyways, I really believe that we should wait for that policy to come forward, because then you're really going to set your benchmarks and really give direction to staff when they come back to us with plans on where you want to go. Mr. Bowles.
Yeah, through the mayor to the council, just to echo that, it was never intended to say that there was a cut. In fact, you could reword it to say exceed a benchmark of 1 park per 2014, because, and we can use, like, I don't know how that works with communication and everybody else to update the document that they put in front of council, but it is still draft until approved. That 100% could be done. And I know that there's a growth document that Councillor Bruno was asked for to bring forward, and uniquely these stats will play into that, because in order to accommodate that growth, we're going to need a number of parks, and having the trail system that we have is going to be uniquely valuable to achieve that growth and meet the requirements of trails we need for that. So this data, I think, will be useful in assessing how we can manage that growth. But from staff perspective, you could easily have said that we'd exceed a benchmark of 1 park per 2,000.
Councillor?
I will gladly read it your way, Mr. Mayor. I have no problem with that. One thing, when I read the Parks and Rec Master Plan, it did say in there, these numbers are based on 2016 figures, by the way, population, that we do have too many parks at Park Colborne, as per standard by the whoever the park authority is. I don't know who it is, but okay, I got no problem with that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hoyle.
To the mayor, to I guess everyone in the FCM conference, they were stressing parks, green spaces, and facilities for recreation. So those are the big three. So we should be going up, not down anyway.
Yeah, I think what you'll have, quite frankly, you're right, because we were both there. And I mean, you got to look at the way Port Colborne was developed. You had 3 municipalities that are now 1. There's areas in town where at least the old village of Humberston and the town of Port Colborne, where you can go 2 blocks and there's 3 parks. Some are a lot bigger than others. Does that make sense? I mean, you may get rid of a small park in a neighborhood, but they have 2 other parks to go to, yet you're going to enhance a park somewhere else or build a new park in a new development. You're still at your same numbers if you've got numbers of parks, but I think staff needs to do this. Councillor Bruno.
It's probably unfair for Councillor Hoyle because he wouldn't have seen the presentation. But when they did present it, what they said was that the trend was to go to community parks. That the clientele of today wants to take their kid where there's also a water spray pad. And there's also all this stuff. So my view is that document was a guiding point to what are the trends. Because if those 3 half-a-block parks within 2 blocks from each other, by making one disappear, the other ones use the money and make them a great park, or we put money into Lockview Park and there's not just H.H. Knoll with all that stuff. That's just an example. But at the end of the day, I think it's really quality over quantity that I would say in a community this size you want, because, you know, my grandchildren, they all want to go to the park with the most playground equipment in it or the most interactive stuff. So, I mean, it sounds like the consultants are saying that's the trend. And I think they were saying that at FCM, more green space doesn't mean parks. It could be trails, right? It could be bike paths. It could be, yeah. Anyways,
Definitely.
so
Okay.
yeah.
So I really do look forward to the parks policy coming forward, because I think we really can sink our teeth into that, council, with regards to how, you know, through this visioning, where we see, and what the councillors have said tonight, where we see we're going to move ahead with parks and how we're going to really develop current parks and enhance our current parks. So, thank you. Further questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, council. We're not not doing 8.5, doing 8.6, okay. 8.5 we already passed, right? No, we're not doing that one. Item 8.6. Recommendation that Public Works Department Report 2023-102 be received, that the billing of the Young Hop Wagner municipal drains be invoiced in accordance with the Drainage Act as outlined in Appendix A of Public Works Department Report 2023-102, that the Young and Hop Wagner drain levy bylaw be approved. If I could have Councillors Bodner and Hoyle move that. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I pulled this to highlight actually, and our drainage superintendents here could speak to it, and probably the treasurer would like to get a piece of the action too. It seems, well, since I've been on council, we've always had a tough time with the railways getting them to clean their, area or let us use their ditch or something. But I'll leave it up to staff to explain this dilemma, and it really is serious. So turn it over to staff.
Who wants to take this, Mr. Louie or Mr. Bowles? Or Lana? Lana? Ms. Vanaveen, we'll let you talk to us about this then.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. So through the entire project of the Young Hop-Wagner drain, we had difficulties with the railway. Not necessarily in the beginning, but more so in the construction end of things. Getting the meetings, getting the permitting that was required. There were issues all along. As a small municipality, I had gone to the Drainage Superintendents Association, and I had also gone to OMAFRA, looking for help from them to be able to bring these problems forward, and seeing if they can expedite and make things move a little bit quicker. So 2 years ago, I believe it was, or possibly a year ago, we had a cry out from another municipality asking us to support them in their railway endeavors. I'll put it politely, with railway endeavors. AMO has since been involved, and Roma, and I'm sorry, I can't give you the full word of those because I don't know it. I only know the acronym. But in any case, they have both been involved, and there's a potential that it may become a class action lawsuit. We're not entirely sure at this point. The railway does have a significant portion of the billings to be done, as you've seen the numbers in the report. And we are going to invoice them like we invoice everybody else, or bill, whichever you prefer. They are a property owner. We are following the processes of the Drainage Act, and at this point, this is the stance that we're taking. We have had Mr. Bowles has had our lawyer involved in a couple of the meetings that we had with Roma and AMO. Should we get to that point, we will take legal action, but we're just hoping that they pay.
Alana, thank you. You're going to be a little bit more kinder than I will be, because at FCM, CN had a fairly large booth and a very great spot right in the middle of the whole foyer into all the meeting rooms that we were in and out of. And I met our area reps and our Ontario reps, and I asked them if they brought their checkbook with them because they owed us a little over $200,000 and some odd $1,000. They kind of laughed, I laughed, and I said, guys, I'm really not kidding, although I can be a fun guy. I am not kidding. I said, you guys got to start paying these bills. I said, we're not the only community in Ontario. There's a number of us. I said, we're not going to stand by and make our drainage users foot your tab for the drainage work. It doesn't go on the tax bill. It goes on the drainage area of that drain. So all the landowners within that drain have to pay, and you're one of them. The next day, I asked if anybody higher was going to be attending the conference, and lo and behold, the vice president of CN was there. The other guys were off getting a coffee, and they saw me go walking towards her, and I think they panicked because they came charging down the hall. And I asked her, I introduced myself, and I said, did you bring your checkbook? because you guys owe us a little over 200 and some odd $1,000 for some drainage work. We got into a great conversation. The people I talked to the day before, who I know, Scott and I've met him at Good Roads and a number of other conferences that we continue to have this conversation. They try to intercede, and I kind of fought them off on that. And I told her, I'm serious. I said, the city of Port Colborne, among other municipalities, will not put up with you guys not paying your bill. We're not going to do it. So if it means legal action, it means a class action, this municipality will be part of that. I mean, I said to her, do we just need to stop up your ditches that flow into our drains and let your property flood? I said, I don't think you want that. But if it comes to that, that's where it may come. This is serious business, guys. I mean, if you look at this report and what some landowners pay, and as Brian will tell you, a lot of them come in with a check, pay their fair share because that's their farmland, and they know if that's not protected, they're losing a lot of crops and losing a lot of money. They need these drains completed on a timely fashion and done properly, which our staff does. But as mayor of this municipality, I will not, whether it's the CN or the CP rail, not pay their fair share for what they owe the city of Port Colborne. I think it's ridiculous. I think they need to get the message. I have sent letters to both organizations in the past. We will send another letter. We'll include both the province and the federal government, because railways come under the Federal Act, and get them involved. I've talked to former mayor, now our MP Vance Badaway, about this, and he's in total agreement. And I think he dealt with a little bit of this when he was outgoing as mayor back in 2014. So, is that all right, Councillor?
Yeah, that's great, because the average person on that drain cannot afford to pay CN's bill. And through you to staff, how do we, so if someone's not paying their bill, do we charge interest?
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the council and council, we will follow our normal billing practices, and if they don't pay, we will accrue interest as we work with AMO and the other organizations that support municipalities like ourselves, and through our lawyer, and we'll be back to council if there isn't payment, with options on how to move forward.
Okay. Further questions, comments? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thanks, council. (9.4) correspondence. Town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury, with regards to their motion to endorse the right to repair movement and to call on the government to expedite, this is the federal government, to expedite the promised consultations to enshrine this principle in consumer protection law, with specific consultations and measures related to supporting the agricultural sector undertaken. If I could have this moved by Councillors Bodner and Elliott. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I brought this forward because I'd like us to support this, not just receive it. If you read it, it's, I think, common sense, and I think we've all been in a situation where we have a product and the company says you can't get in it to fix it. You know, and this is farm related, but it's everybody. So I just like us to support this, not just receive it.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments? Hearing that, so if the mover and seconder can, because it was just to receive, change that as a friendly amendment to support the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury. Councillor Elliott, you're fine with that? Great. Okay, seeing nothing further, all in favor? Well, that's carried. All right. We're on now to motions. So earlier, council, we did waive our procedural bylaw to allow Councillor Bodner to bring forward a motion that's time sensitive. I'm going to go to Councillor Bodner at this time. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to bring forward the following motion, that the city clerk be directed to send a letter to the chief firearms officer of Ontario regarding the shooting range approval for Port Colborne and District Conservation Club located at 3757 Second Concession Road, Port Colborne, Ontario, and that the letter include a request for the Chief Firearms Officer to give careful consideration in regard for community impacts and land use conflict when making its decision on the shooting range approval for the Port Colborne and District Conservation Club.
Seconder, Councillor Hoyle. Questions, comments? All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Are there any notices of motion? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll provide notice of my intention to bring forward a motion at the July 18th, 2023 council meeting with respect to waiving the fees for a zoning bylaw amendment application to be applied for by the Royal Canadian Legion located at 67 Clarence Street, Port Colborne, Ontario.
Thank you, Councillor. Minutes of boards and committees. Downtown Port Colborne Business Improvement Area, minutes of the November 8th, 2022, January 26th, 23, February 21st, March 21st, April 25th, 2023, and approved the DPCBIA budget for 2023. If I could have Councillors Beauregard and Bruno move that. Questions on those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. Bylaws. We have bylaws 20.1, 20.2, 20.3, and 20.4. And 20.5, thank you. The addendum item. If I could have Councillors Elliott and Bagu move those. Are there questions to any of the bylaws? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. If I could have Councillors Bruno and Baggio move that the Council do now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. 21.1, Chief Administrative Office Report 2023-121, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. 21.2, Corporate Services Department Human Resources Report 2023-116, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees and labor relations or employee negotiations. 21.3, Corporate Services Department Report 2023-123, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. 21.4, Chief Administrative Office Report 2023-125, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. Questions? All in favor? That's carried. Before we adjourn this portion and move into closed session, we will not be coming back into open session. Thank you for joining us this evening. Remember this Saturday, July 1st, the Antique and Classic Power Show out on Wilhelm Road, the Learn Farm, Lakeview, HH&O Lakeview Park, Canada Day celebrations with the Optimist Club, concert series downtown, fireworks, loads of fun going on. And our Mark Fairchild Band starting up soon in the original HH&O band shell at Lakeview Park. Please enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.